Hey, friends, welcome back to the Do Cool Shit podcast. Obviously, it's Meryl here, and I'll be honest, I am somewhat unprepared for today. I had a guest lined up, and there shit happens, So guess what? That guest is we're gonna record next week. It's gonna be a really awesome one that I am super, super excited for. And that left me with kind of scrambling for today's episode, but I promise I won't let you down. I'm basing this episode off of a recent conversation that I had with a client about something that's like kind of vulnerable, very powerful. We're going to talk about your narrative, the story that you've lived by, sometimes even without realizing it. And like honestly, I'm kind of wondering why I didn't do an episode on this sooner because this is probably one of the most important conversations we can have when it comes to your life, your relationship with food, your body, your habits and behaviors, your goals, like honestly, your entire freaking life. It is directing you quietly, consistently, sometimes violently, and a lot of people never even question it. But so, let's dive in. I want to start with just mentioning a little bit about this conversation that I had. It was very powerful with a client recently. We were talking about her eating behaviors, specifically around overeating. This is something that she tends to do often. It is a pattern. We've been working through it for the past like probably 2 months together and making a lot of progress. But this is something that takes time. And so we had this recent conversation and digging into, not the service level behavior, but the driver. And we found out something really interesting. So, discussing through, we're like, it's not hunger that's happening. It's not a lack of discipline. It's not a lack of knowledge. It's not falling off track. A lot of why this is happening for her, why she is going into these episodes of overeating is stemming from rebellion. Rebellion against, I'm not going to air her things without her permission, but, rebellion against diet culture that was present for her in a lot of her life from society and from family. Rebellion against being told that her body wasn't good enough in one way or another. Rebellion against her worth being tied to her weight or what her body looked like, or even, the foods that she was or wasn't eating, and rebellion against pressure to follow these rigid rules that she honestly never even really chose for herself. And if you've lived under that kind of control, whether it's external or internal, it makes absolute sense that part of you wants to push back. It's not something that's like trying to sabotage you. It's a part of you that's trying to protect your autonomy. So again, her overeating wasn't the problem. It's something that she doesn't want to do, but there's also this part of her that actually finds joy in being able to eat certain foods without like planning. It feels joyful. It feels like freedom, but just the way that she's doing it didn't feel quote unquote right for her. So, digging into this narrative and realizing that the narrative that she had around certain foods was not hers. It was someone else's. And it's actually something that was hurting her and is something that she wants to shift. And we talked about creating a new narrative, and she asked me like, "Hey, how do I even do that?" And I was like, "Oh, wow. This is a great that's a great question," and the topic of today's episode. So, what is a narrative anyway? Every single one of us has a narrative, and whether you wanna look at it as, like, one big thing with lots of things involved or many different narratives, but, it's a story that tells us who we are, how the world works, what we're allowed to do. Sometimes it's loud, but most of the time, it's really running kind of automatically in the background. It's running how we operate. It has come from somewhere, someplace, someone, and, sometimes we don't even know where it comes from. But our narratives really decide things like how we eat, how we train, how we handle stress, what we think we deserve, how we respond when things get hard, whether we trust ourselves, whether we're allowed to rest, whether we believe that we're capable of something or not. It's the lens that we walk through life with. And again, the kicker here is that most people didn't choose their narrative. It was handed to them from family, society, maybe other coaches, diet culture, trauma, whether it was big T or little t, praise, fear, expectation, childhood roles, teachers, even TV shows. I'm fairly certain that Full House has created some of the narratives that I've had. All of it builds a story. And I will say that narratives aren't inherently bad. Some of them are helpful. Some of them are things that we want to keep as our own and decide that they're our own. Some of them are things that maybe helped us and protected us at some point. Sometimes those things are just not supportive for us anymore. Sometimes it's we reach this point where we need to recognize like this is not mine. Someone created this for me and it just doesn't feel right and I want to shift it. Well, I'm gonna throw out some examples where narratives can come from, naming a few places where these stories often begin. Maybe you grew up praised for being like the disciplined one, the achiever, the one who never needed help. So then your narrative becomes, I don't struggle, I push through. Maybe your family constantly commented on your weight, or you grew up in the like 90s and 2000s, like me. So it's like, oh, my body determines my worth. Maybe you survived chaos, inconsistency, unpredictability, and your narrative became, I can't relax. If I'm not in control, things fall apart. Maybe every diet you ever tried kind of created the narrative that you can't trust yourself. Or maybe you learned early on that like being agreeable and compliant or small, whether it was physically or emotionally, got you love. So your narrative became taking up less space keeps me safe. These stories all make sense. They were strategies, they were survival, they were belonging. But again, at some point, we kind of outgrow them. And maybe you have this feeling of like, I don't like doing this. Why do I do this? Or something just doesn't feel quote unquote right. And when we keep trying to live inside that outdated story, that story that's not really ours, that's when things really start to feel chaotic and frustrating and confusing and like get very self-sabotagey. So this is another aspect that I'm going to throw in where like you're not broken. This isn't a problem type of situation. You're evolving and that narrative isn't. And it's you always can choose, to let it go. But let's talk about control for a second because control is such a big thing and it's a very tricky thing, especially for high achievers. Control is the high achiever's drug of choice. if if things feel uncertain, we try to control harder. If things feel chaotic, we grip the shit out of it. Or if we're afraid of failing, tend to restrict, regulate, optimize, perfect, find the solutions. But here's what happens within that is the more tightly people try to control something, especially when it comes to things like food or time or emotions, the more your nervous system pushes back because that's just not how humans operate. Humans aren't meant to like live in this cage of control, even if we built the cage ourselves. And that's where rebellion can come in. Rebellion is your system saying, like, hey, enough. I'm not doing this anymore. This isn't working for me. And it can come out in ways that actually make us like feel out of control, which is the really funny thing in here. It can look like eating past fullness, just like this client, overeating, binging. It can look like skipping the gym, maybe overtraining for some people, freezing and doing nothing, impulse spending, or going to buy lots of stuff, emotionally driven eating, procrastination, burnout cycles, overwhelm that do it perfect, then crash, then feel shame, and then try again harder. It feels like you're failing, but you're not failing, you're reacting. Control and rebellion are like two sides of the same coin. Is that a saying? They're, very, very similar. They feed one another. And until we change the narrative underneath, that cycle just continues to repeat. So, one thing that's important here is identifying what the current narrative is. So if you're listening right now and you're thinking, okay, I have a narrative, but I don't know what it is, here's a few questions that you can start with. And as always, I will write these in the show notes for you. What do I believe about myself when things get hard? What story do I tell myself about my ability to handle food, training, stress, emotions? Where did those beliefs actually come from? Did I consciously choose them or did I inherit them? Does this narrative support the person I am now or the person that I want to be? Does it support the person that I want to become? These are all questions, like don't overthink it. Let yourself brain dump into these areas. Let yourself get curious, explore it without judgment. Common high achiever narratives can sound like I should be able to handle everything myself. Rest is weakness, or, needing help is weakness or means that I'm not strong or independent. If I slow down, I'll fall behind. If I can't be perfect, I just shouldn't even bother. Food needs to be controlled. Discomfort means that I'm failing. If I'm not productive, then I'm worthless. Be honest with yourself, as you answer these questions. And there's probably a lot of narratives that you have in place. Start in an area that kind of stands out to you. Be honest, don't be judgmental. Awareness is always the first step, right? So, and you can play around with the narrative. If it doesn't sound right to you, then keep playing around with it. And then it comes time to create a new narrative. Guys, this can be really fun, right? You get to choose something new, something that's aligned, something that's supportive, something that is yours. It is not someone else's, it is yours. So we have to name the old story, say it clearly. I learned that rest is lazy. I learned my body needed to shrink. I learned that pushing harder is always the answer. I learned that food can't be trusted. Whatever the narrative is, say it clearly, name it. At this point, you may dive into understanding what it protected. Maybe that old story protected you from criticism or rejection, unpredictability, fear, shame, or some way that it actually helped you before as well. This gave me praise, it gave me love, etc. And maybe at this point you need to thank it because maybe it did work for you at some point. And it's like, hey, thanks for supporting me until this point, and I'm going to drop you. I don't need you anymore. I'm moving into a different place. And then you can choose the one you want. The one you want now. This is very, very empowering. Create the new story that you're operating with. Create the new narrative. I fuel my body because I value how I feel. Rest is a strategy, not a weakness. I can trust myself to make supportive choices. Success does not require perfection. I don't need to earn food or worth. I am allowed to take up space. My identity isn't tied to how much I can carry alone. My goals matter, but so does my well being. Your new narrative should feel supportive. And it also, you know, should kind of stretch you just a bit. I don't want to put the naughty ass shoulds in here, but these are the things where make sure that this narrative is supportive and provides opportunity for expansiveness in here. And we know that expansiveness and growth always has, some friction in there. It may not feel you may not feel like it's exactly it, but is this something that's part of who you're becoming? And this is, again, something that's going to guide you moving forward. And you always have the choice moving forward to check in with yourself and make sure that this is still a supportive narrative. And if it's not, then adjust it or let it go and create a new one. I'm going to give you just a couple more examples, and I'm going to put it through the terms of high achievers because this is something that I see very, very often for people. So let's go through a few examples. One is someone who is an overcommitted lifter, someone who trains really, really, really hard. And, maybe their old story is if I'm not training 6 days a week, then I'm not serious. And the new story for that person is training sustainably is how I perform long term. Let's view the next example as someone who is in a high position job or a business owner, and they tend to stress eat. Their old story is I should be able to push through anything. And then their new story is taking care of myself helps me lead better. Someone who struggles with tracking food because they may consider themselves a perfectionist. Their old story is if I can't track it, then I can't trust myself. Their new story is I build trust through practice and through tuning in with myself, not precision. The person whose favorite word starts with a P, and that's what their goal is in life, is to be productive and feel like rest equals laziness. Their old story is my worth is in my productivity. And the new story is that my worth is inherent. My energy is valuable. Rest fuels momentum. These are huge shifts. I hope that you can kind of sense the empowerment that is involved in them. They change who you are. They change behavior, but not by force. It's through alignment. It feels better. It feels open. It feels more like you or who you want to be. So, here's what I would really like for you to take away today is that one, you're not failing, you're not weak, you're not broken, you're not behind. If this resonates for you, you're simply living with a story that isn't yours or isn't yours anymore. And you are allowed to evolve. You're allowed to choose differently. You're allowed to rewrite the whole freaking thing. Your narrative is powerful. And when you choose it intentionally, everything changes. Cool shit doesn't happen when you're living inside someone else's story or operating with someone else's narrative. It happens when you choose your own. And then you can show up like the badass that you are authentically. So, as always, like the cool shit is on the other side of doing. And I know that this can feel like a lot and it can be a very uncertain place because you're like, well, I don't know what it is. Go through the questions. Take some time with yourself, by yourself, or, with a friend. You can do this. This works really, really well. My friend Lauren and I have done this together a lot in talking about inherited legacies. But take some time to actually go through and do it. When you uncover these narratives, again, it can just feel very freeing and very empowering when you use that to create your own and let that one go. If this hit home for you, share it, like it, do all of the things. If there's someone that you think would get a lot out of this episode, please share it with them as well. And if you want to chat about your narratives, whether you've gone through this already or you want to set up a time to chat through it with me, then shoot me a message on Instagram or an email and we'll do it together. All right, guys, until next time.